you have any pride in the way that the Cowboys have taken to this offseason? It's been really interesting to watch the ways in which, past off seasons Cowboys fans have been the man with the stick meme of like do something, and the Cowboys have done something this offseason. How have you felt about the approach that they've taken to this offseason?
Yeah, I love it, and I feel like I'm not alone in that regard. There's a lot of positivity around what the Cowboys have done and what this front office has done, because not only have they added talent, but they haven't had to wager their future to add that talent. I mean, you gave up a couple picks for guys like Stephon Gilmore and Brandon Cooks. You have the entirety of your draft capital, for the most part, still at your disposal in April, and you've filled some other holes depth-wise through free agency. Now, they haven't been just these gaudy signings that have turned the league on its head or anything, but you legitimately found two starters for very little pay, for very little to nothing in order to trade for them with Gilmore and Cooks. And then you're able to find that depth. It puts you in a really good position because you had a nucleus. You had some cornerstone players that you could build around. Now you're able to just add talent. Anything from here on out is a positive. Anything that you grab in the draft, anything you were able to sign here in the latter parts of the free agency period, you have every move on the table here over the next month and a half. And normally they do their job to kind of fill some holes, and they're able to work their way into being available for that on draft night. But now you get a whole month to really plan what your roster is going to look like. And I think from a roster building standpoint, it puts them in a great spot.
Kyle, as we head toward the NFL draft, now less than a month away from the NFL's annual selection meeting in Kansas City, how comfortable are you feeling about where the Cowboys are, what they've done in free agency, to give you an idea of what direction they may try to go when it comes to the NFL draft this year?
Yeah, it's interesting, KG, because you look at the additions that they've made, and now since you do feel good where you're at 26, I think it makes us less confident in the direction they are going to go, because they can go a number of different areas. I mean, of course, Bijan Robinson, the running back out of Texas, has been a notable name for quite some time. He's always on the table. Should he miraculously work his way to 26, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, but it's certainly not likely. But if he's there, they're in a position that adding another weapon on offense like that would be a positive thing. Same thing with one of those top wide receivers. Same thing with the top tight ends. If you wanted to add a tight end at that level in the draft, there's a good couple of guys that you can maybe add into the realm there. I think everything is on the table for the draft this year. I don't think there's a position, maybe outside of quarterback, that you can't draft at the 26 overall pick and feel good about it, because I think you really do have a number of options that are going to put you in a good spot at 26, depending on what the board looks like whenever you actually get there.
So, Kyle, my partner here is not really out on the idea of a tight end. And as you know, a lot of mock drafts have put a tight end next to that star. Stephen Jones even said today that they are possibly looking at bulking up the tight end room. Can you make or give a pitch? Can you sell KG on the idea of tight end at 26 for your Cowboys?
Yeah, and I mean, I'll do my best here. It may not actually sway your opinion because you're entitled to it for sure. I'm also of the thinking, for the most part, I'm of the thinking that a tight end and the positional value behind a tight end is very unique to be okay with drafting one at 26, right? But there's two things here that I think give the Cowboys the opportunity to take one of these guys, and I'll put out some names here in a second. But the first option is the fact that you're at 26. You are very likely to not have a first-round grade still on your board, even though there are 32 first-round picks, or this year 31, with Miami forfeiting their selection at 21. You only have about 18 to 22 first-round picks, depending on the room, depending on the organization, depending on the draft class. So if you're at 26, that's 8 to 6 spots behind where you would normally have those first-round grades run out. So if you don't have a first-round grade at 26, you're working into second-round graded players, and those tight ends are going to be at the top of the list because Dalton Kincaid Utah. You've got Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame, Luke Musgrave from Oregon State. You have three legitimate tight ends, KG, that can come in and not only just be these blocking tight ends. You're not drafting Dalton Schultz. You're drafting somebody that you want to be a Zach Ertz, who I would actually compare a Dalton Kincaid to. Or you're drafting Michael Mayer, who I would compare to maybe like a Jason Witten. There are a couple guys there that not only are they're going to be really good players or really good tight ends, but they're going to be a weapon for you to utilize on offense. And if you think about some of the young quarterbacks in the NFL right now, these high-level quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, he's been paired with a Travis Kelce. Jalen Hurts going to the Super Bowl this year, he's been paired with both Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert over the last couple of years. Then before that, you have guys that other big-time tight ends like George Kittle. Guess what? Brock Purdy comes in there, and he's Brock Purdy's best friend. So having a tight end helps your quarterback, and these tight ends are next-level ability. So even if they're available there at 26, I wouldn't necessarily be upset by it.
Okay, that was a nice argument. Now, here's
the counter.
Yeah. So when I look at George Kittle, Mark Andrews, even your boy Dalton Schultz, who's a member of the Houston Texans now, I found those guys later in the draft, third, fourth round guys. I feel like the value in the tight end class this year, I can find myself a really good tight end. Maybe not at the tip-top level of a Dalton Kincaid, who's got a little bit of a back problem these days, apparently. But at the same time, I feel like the draft class is deep enough at tight end where I can find myself a really nice tight end a little bit later in the draft without having to use my number 26 overall pick. When I know I need a little bit of offensive line help, I low-key could get a wide receiver maybe if one falls to me that I like, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Or, someone, of that nature. So that's where my only qualm comes in at.
And I don't blame you one bit. That's part of why I love the draft so much, because anything can happen. Because you think about it, in any given class, any given position, for every Patrick Mahomes, I mentioned him a moment ago, for every Patrick Mahomes, there's a Mitch Trubisky who was taken before him and is not nearly as good, even though he was taken 15 spots higher or whatever it ended up being. But there's also, just like at the tight end position, for every George Kittle, there's an Evan Ingram who doesn't necessarily work out initially. There's a Kyle Pitts who was taken in the top 5, and he doesn't work out initially as well. It's such an interesting process to get to these draft spots, and it makes me, as just a big sports nerd, it makes me excited to think about the process and the ability that goes into finding these guys, and the fact that the Cowboys have been so good at it, at least in the first round these last couple of years. I think it provides a little bit of confidence as somebody that covers this team that they would pick the right guy. So if the pick is at 26 and it's one of those tight ends, they've done their homework. They've done enough to get there. It's just whether or not the prospect's going to work out, but that's the chance you got to take in the draft.
So, Kyle, you are on the draft show, and we are talking to Kyle Youmans of DallasCowboys.com, host on the draft show. You're on the draft show, so I imagine you've done a little bit of this research, and I like asking folks who are doing some of this film work or some of this evaluation, who is your pet cat? Who is the player that you have just found yourself infatuated with?
There's a couple of them. Give me an offensive or defensive. Which one would you rather hear about?
KG?
Defense.
Okay.
Defensive pet cat. Out of reach from the Cowboys, I really like Joey Porter Jr. I think he's phenomenal, cornerback from Penn State. I also really like Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. He played at the Colony during his high school days, and I really like his ability at corner. Those are probably the pet cats. I love this cornerback class. I think it's deep. I think it's got top-heavy talent. I think it's probably the most complete position, top to bottom. If the Cowboys wanted to go and draft a cornerback again, even if it's the first round or later rounds, I wouldn't be against it because I think the value is there. It's quite the opposite with, let's say, interior defensive line and linebacker. I'm not very impressed with either one of those groups for the most part. Sure, they've got some top-heavy talent. I really like Jalen Carter from Georgia at the interior defensive line spot. I like Mozzie Smith from Michigan, but even that's a vast drop-off from Carter to Smith. It's not really 1-2 there. So I would probably say those corners are my pet cat. They've been the most fun to watch because, man, they can light up a defense. They can hit. They can fly to the football, and the physical traits are there as well.
All right, Kyle, before we let you go, you got a draft take, a hot take that you want to fire off before we let you get out of here?
Ooh, a hot take specifically?
Mm-hmm.
Whew, you know what, KG? This one's for you. The Cowboys are going to select Dalton Kincaid out of Utah with that 26th overall pick. How about that? That's my hot take.
That's a great way to get me at the end, Kyle. I appreciate it, man.